decarbonizing industrial value chains with clean hydrogen. We have a very full agenda today, so let me get right into it. I would like to start by inviting up Mr. Dario Laguti, Director of Sustainable Energy for the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Dario, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. And good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome as well from my side to this important event about hydrogen. An interesting topic as covers many different aspects of energy. Maybe I have a little presentation that I would like to use for the opening remarks. If we can project it, please. Great, excellent. Thank you very much. So, let's talk about some global trends around hydrogen. So there is certainly an unprecedented political support for hydrogen. You speak to any government in the world and hydrogen comes up. Maybe not at the first, but second and third will certainly come up as one of the solutions they are looking for decarbonizing their industry, transport, heating, a lot of different areas. And they all look at hydrogen as one of the solutions, many governments as well as the main solution. However, notwithstanding this enormous political support, very few projects have actually been done at scale. Only, according to the International Energy Agency, only 4% of hydrogen projects get financed. And one of the main issues is on the demand side of hydrogen. There is a lot of hype on supply of hydrogen, but a bit less, I would say, on the demand side. Well, we get to the demand as well. We're talking about the demand, right? And the EU is the only one who has actually have shown some a projection, or an ambition, I would say, more than a projection, about hydrogen production. They're looking at using 20 million tons of clean hydrogen by 2030. For your information, world hydrogen production today, which is used mainly as a feedstock, as you know, is 90 million tons, 90. So the EU is just saying by 2030 we want to be 20% of today's market. Obviously in 2030 the market is supposed to be a lot bigger, but that is a massive number. Current hydrogen costs, this is one of the main issues as well on the demand side, why it's not creating demand, they're very expensive. Obviously we are talking about hydrogen produced through renewable energies. 98% of hydrogen produced today is produced by using fossil fuels, and we get to that point as well. As I said, less than 1% is actually coming from renewables energy. So where does hydrogen come from today? This is the sources of hydrogen. You can see that electricity, which is basically renewable energy using electrolyzers, you cannot even make it into the graph, unfortunately. So mostly of hydrogen, or actually all of hydrogen today, is basically produced by using fossil fuels, which obviously creates emissions. As you can see, the hydrogen produced with CCS is marginally when compared to the rest of the production. So the challenge is how to decarbonize hydrogen production itself, hydrogen by itself, and double its consumption by 2050. So on the left-hand side, black and gray, you see that's hydrogen today. Small pie, mostly, or I would say only fossil fuels, if you allow me that expression. And on the right-hand side, you have a much bigger pie, which is what hydrogen, the role that hydrogen could play in the decarbonization of our industry, and where it should come from, according to the UNECE Hydrogen Tas Force that we have put together, and we have some of members sitting here as we speak. A lot, as you can see, coming, more than half coming from electrolysis of water. So what is it? So as I talked about the Hydrogen Task Force, and the reason why we established this is exactly to look at the role of hydrogen in the decarbonization of the industrial systems. And so we put together all of the actors in the space around hydrogen to identify what's the right role, what's the right cost, what is the right applications for hydrogen, and what are the trade-offs. What is the cost of doing that? What are the investments needed, and what, if any, there are trade-offs? If you use water for hydrogen production, you don't use water for other purposes. If you use electricity to produce hydrogen, you don't use that electricity for other purposes. These are some of the decisions that policymakers, utilities, markets, operators need to do when looking at hydrogen. And what does it mean? To help us guiding through this complex, very complex issue, a very complex theme about hydrogen, extremely complex, I would say, as complex as simple the molecule and as complex as the management of that molecule is in technical terms. We are applying some of our methodologies, which have been applied to a number of mineral resources and energy resources around the world. And so we're looking at, using the UNFC, which is a classification methodology for classifying, for helping create a market around hydrogen. We heard about blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, black hydrogen, gold, etc., all kind of colors. I think one of the things that we're trying to establish as a standard, I wouldn't call it standard, classification around hydrogen, taking into consideration, of course, technical and economic perspective, but as well an environmental and social perspective. You have to consider that if you use water for hydrogen, you're not using water eventually for human consumption or for irrigation, for agricultural issues. So, especially, and this is very true in a number of countries which are under water stress, and you know that climate change will impact negatively our water cycles. So all of these aspects need to be taken into consideration when you're looking at hydrogen. It's not simply how do we do hydrogen, but how do we do that and with a purpose, and how do we do that in the current environment, and looking into the future, particularly what will be the climate change impact on the availability of water, for example, as I said, on the availability of renewable energy, as I said. So this is, talking about the value chain development, where to start. This is a little design of where is the current value chain about hydrogen. And creating an ecosystem around hydrogen is very complex. It exists already one, but it's made for a specific use of hydrogen as a feedstock for chemical processes. But if you're looking at hydrogen and use it for the different purposes that I mentioned at the beginning, then you're looking at creating an overall entire new ecosystem around this commodity. And it starts, as you can see, you have plenty of actors involved in creating this new ecosystem. And all of this needs to work if you want to have no impact on the environment, or mitigate as much as possible the impact on the environment, needs to work in symbiosis and in coordination alongside. And the way we believe, but this is obviously subject to discussion, and my keynote speech is exactly to offer an opportunity for the panelists to express their views on that, is where we should be starting with hydrogen. I think we should start by decarbonizing the production of hydrogen as a chemical feedstock. Already decarbonizing 90 million tons of hydrogen produced today, mostly by steam reformation, is already a challenge per se. It's already a challenge in itself. And you're already having an impact on the environment by not producing pollution when producing hydrogen in chemical feedstock, which is necessary for a number of chemical processes, and there are no alternatives for that. One name is fertilizers, of course, and that's another aspect that I think it should be, when looking at creating hydrogen ecosystem, that's where we should start. And secondly, where we should go as a second step, how about creating industrial clusters? There are a number of hard-to-abate industries. We know them, right? Cement and steel and other chemical processes that need very high temperatures, extremely high temperatures. So below a certain, generally it is considered that below 200 degrees you can use that heat, you can produce that heat through electrification. Above 200, that's become complex from an electrification perspective, unless you change completely your technology, of course. But in those industries, how about using, there's a lot of discussions and analysis done on using hydrogen to substitute for fossil fuels used for heating in those industrial processes. And how about if we are to substitute hydrogen, giving as well some of the technical issues around transport of hydrogen, around storing of hydrogen, and the production of hydrogen, how about creating industrial clusters, i.e., position the hydrogen production close to where the consumer is? And that's why you are creating as well, maybe, potentially, the demand that today is lacking. And so this one, maybe it's a second step in getting through, in creating that ecosystem. And then we can look at a larger role for hydrogen maybe tomorrow in decarbonizing a much larger value chain. And with this, I leave you this food for thought for you, maybe a bit provocative, but the panelists certainly will know more, much more than me. But, and I thank you for your attention, and thank you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Dario. Excellent setting the scene for us. Now I'd like to turn straight to our keynote speaker, Ms. Sonnet Pinar, Head of Communications and Publishing for Green Cape of South Africa. Sonnet, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege for us to be representing some thoughts around where hydrogen fits into the South African narrative and the conversation. And I would be amiss to start without addressing the concept of the just transition, which for us is key and central. And just as we all know, just transition, and specifically from a South African context, aims to achieve a quality of life for all of South Africa, in the context of increasing the ability to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate, fostering climate resilience, and reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 in line with the best available science. So within this context, the conversation about where hydrogen fits into the South African landscape is then very well outlined in the recently released Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan. So we have a framework, we have a context, and it is embedded in this idea that people are at the heart of the decision-making, and that communities are at the heart of the decision-making, and that the benefits have to be equitable. So I just wanted to put that in that framework. But the 5-year Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan outlines these various interventions and investments that the country believes is crucial for the shift towards a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy. So if this gets executed thoughtfully, South Africa's energy transition, which many economies are going through, presents an opportunity to drive industrial development, innovation, and critically economic diversification. And these are all critical to alleviate our country's triple challenge of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. So within that framework, this conversation takes place. So it goes without saying that this implementation plan is a clear invitation for both our international and our local investors and donors to collaborate with countries like South Africa, and specifically with South Africa on our just energy transition journey. In the JET implementation plan, South Africa has prioritized specific investment needs in particularly the electricity sector, new energy vehicle sector, and then also, relevant to this conversation, the green hydrogen sector. So maybe just back to the vision of green hydrogen for South Africa, as the Department of Science and Innovation has set out in its Hydrogen Society Roadmap. South Africa really wants to establish a globally competitive green hydrogen industry for local and international consumption. And once again, embedded is the socio-economic and economic development through continued industrialization, which for us is key. So industrialization and making sure that this translates into jobs is a critical component in this conversation. So again, core investment focus on key interventions to position South Africa as a world-leading exporter of green hydrogen, going back to the demand situation. So from our perspective, there are many advantages in our country for the production of green hydrogen. World-renowned renewable energy resources. We do have available land for development. We do have the availability of relevant minerals and metals. And I guess one of the interesting things to note is the existing asset base and the capabilities for downstream benefit through the beneficiation technology, the Fischer-Tropsch and the DRI. So all of these things enable us to actually be set up for the production of high-value green products. So sustainable aviation fuel, green bunker fuels, green methanol, green steel. And for us, green hydrogen also presents this opportunity for re-industrialization, especially in the steel sector, as you mentioned, but also through industrialization in mining, agriculture, beneficiation, and renewable energy. So with the nascent nature of this sector globally, for us, a big initial emphasis is on renewable energy industrialization. And some of that is encapsulated in our South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, which is in the final stages of development. So just linking all of that very closely back to industrialization, decarbonization, job creation. And I think it is important to note the export aspect of green hydrogen and the potential there. If we look at some of the scenarios that were developed for the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan that has been done with multiple of our partners in the room, the scenarios with green hydrogen exports and associated industries creates up to 1.8 million more jobs in our context than scenarios without. So for us, every job counts. So if you can add 1.8 million more jobs through a specific intervention, that is something that is critical in the context as well. So one of the interlocked 7 streams scoped in the JET implementation plan for hydrogen, and I'll wrap up with that, is the focus on skills. Because obviously, if you have to reorder, you have to look at the skills that's required. So strong foundation in green hydrogen. And one of the things that we are busy doing, and my time says I'm up, but I'll wrap up now, is the green hydrogen skills needs assessment that's being done with the South African Department of Higher Education and Training. So there's 185 hydrogen-specific capabilities required, 138 occupations identified, and within this implementation and figuring that out, international collaboration could be of massive benefit. So I think I've highlighted some of the key focus areas in the conversation that will also be taken forward by our panelists. The organization I represent is an economic development agency, Green Cape, and where we sit between government, industry, academia, and other stakeholders where we want to see the unlocking of jobs and investment in the green economy. And in that process, we have seen immense value in being part of these international conversations through the International Clean Tech Network, the International Network of Energy Transition Think Tanks, the National Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy. So I just want to highlight again the value of these partnerships. And I hope that this sets the stage for these extended conversations, for mutually beneficial partnerships, to ultimately realize an equitable distribution of the costs and benefits of our collective climate action within this context. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sonat. Really excellent and inspiring remarks. Now, I realized that I was so excited to get to the first 2 speakers, I neglected to introduce myself. My name is Matthew Wittenstein. I'm the Chief of Section for Energy Connectivity at United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, and I'll be the moderator today. But hopefully you won't hear more from me than the questions, because these are the people you want to hear from, the people you came to see. So let me quickly introduce all 6 of our panelists, and then I'll ask you questions one by one. We have first Dr. Lutz Schäfer, Deputy Head of Division for Energy, Urban Development, Mobility Infrastructure, the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. Next to him, we have Mr. Masatsuga Yoshioka, Executive Director, New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization from Japan. Next to him, Ms. Tilda Helston, Director of Global Cooperation, Danish Energy Agency. Then Ms. Pecha Schwager, Chief of Climate and Technology Partnerships Division at UNIDO, our co-organizer for this event. Then Ms. Patricia Marcos Widobro, Senior Climate Change Specialist at the Global Environment Facility. And finally, Mr. Alessandro Izzo, Director and Head of Equity, Growth Capital, and Project Finance, EU Operations Directorate, European Bank of Investment. So you can see we have a really illustrious and quite diverse panel in terms of perspectives. So Dr. Schäfer, let me please start with you. How is it that BMZ is bringing clean hydrogen projects to scale with developing countries in particular through the PTX Development Fund? Please.
Okay, thank you for the question. First of all, I would like to give some remarks on the provocations you said, but maybe we can discuss that later. So let's talk about the PTX fund. The PTX fund was launched at the COP 2027 with a budget of about 250 million euros, Meanwhile, we increased the budget up to 270 million euros, and it focuses on socio-economic, sustainable development and just transition, and then the focus of hydrogen.
Maybe a little closer to the microphone. Yeah.
That's better? Yes. Okay. So what we would like to do is to support investing in hydrogen projects. We would like to limit the risk we still have in hydrogen projects, as they are still very risky ones. So we would like to close the financial gap and support the bankability and close the bankability gaps. And finally, we do mobilize, that's what we hope, billions of investments on hydrogen projects and pooling the investments of several project developers and pack the money together from the public sector and the private sector and doing this finally financing hydrogen project. So as I tell you, last year we launched the fund, and we had 1 year to set up the process on how do we put what might be the best way to bring the money in the projects. And after 1 year, we can say that the process now is nearly close to be set up. So what I can say is that we hope that within the next month, the first calls of the fund will be taken.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Yoshioka, let me turn to you. I understand Japan has a revised national hydrogen strategy and green innovation fund. Could you talk to us a bit about what some of the highlighted features and initiatives that are planned to be implemented under this revised fund?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. And let me explain about Japanese policy recently. And as you asked me, the important thing that important feature of the new fund, it is called Green Innovation Fund in Japan. Sorry.
It was not your fault.
You should be okay to go ahead.
Okay. Seemingly, yes, it does work. Works. Yes. The most important feature of the new fund is amount itself. That amount is $18 billion, and we are talked to expense this kind of fund in 10 years. So we needed to experience $1.8 billion a year. Because our annual budget normally is just $1 billion. So the newly created fund would be a double size expense in a year. So the amount itself is very huge for us as well. So we are now expanding our organization, like hiring new employees, and we are seeking new offices. Anyway, we are expanding our agency's body itself. And as for the project, individual project, we are now doing hydrogen utilization in steel making process. I think it's a very difficult project for most of us to tackle with. As you may know, steel making is doing the following process. First, the iron ore. We use iron ore and coal. Iron ore consists of Fe2O3, and the coal is of course C. When we are putting these materials into one furnaces and boiled it, iron ore is restored and separate Fe and O, and O gathers C and getting producing CO2. So in order to restore iron ore, we are producing Fe and CO2. But in this time, we are using hydrogen instead of C. In that process, in order to restore iron ore, we are using iron ore and hydrogen. We are producing Fe and H2O. That means water. It's very difficult because in order to restore such kind of process, in order to go through such kind of process, we need to make a very big furnaces that can be endured in the high pressure and high temperature. But now we got a new fund from the government. We are now embarking on this difficult project. Thank you very much. That's the answer for me.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Helston, if I can turn to you. How is the Danish Energy Agency working closely with developing countries, in particular on hydrogen development? I'm aware, for example, of the South African Energy Partnership Program. Perhaps it's one example you could share?
Yes. Kindly let me put some words to that. But first of all, thank you for showing up. I guess this will be the last panel of the day. So I think it's very nice to be here, but also let's have a discussion later on and ask a lot of questions. So, back in the 1970s, Denmark had some challenges in regards to getting their imports of fossil fuels. Actually, it was due to a crisis with the Middle East. So the Danish politic level, they said to one another, we need to be less dependent on the fossil fuels. Please, dear entrepreneurs, clever-head young people, please start helping us finding some solutions. And it just so well happened that in 1990, some very bright heads, they said, well, we have wind turbines on land. What would happen if we took these turbines and put them into the sea, where the wind is so much better? Well, that was actually the beginning of the offshore wind adventure for Denmark. And in the beginning, it was very much land turbines just being placed in water. Now we are more advanced than that, but it's just to say, it takes slow, small steps, one by one. And today, actually, wind and solar covers approximately 60% of the green electricity in our total electricity consumption in Denmark. 60%, that's, quite an effort, we think. And at the same time, we maintain a very strong security of supply, almost 100%. So, that is the case for us to ask other countries if we should have partnerships. And that is what the Danish Energy Agency actually does. We have 24 energy partnerships with other countries' energy agencies, and we talk about the Danish case, not to say one size fits all or the Danish solution is the solution for everyone, more to say maybe use this little country of 5.5 million people, maybe use us kind of like as an example where you can ask us questions, you can take out the parts you want, and then you can leave the rest with us, and we will take care of that. But it's actually in order to inspire other countries. So, working with South Africa, that's probably one of our strongest partnerships. It goes back to 2012, and we are working within 3 areas mainly: greening of the grid, transmission, and generation. And then we are making a wind atlas also. Actually, a wind atlas, what is that? That is a map showing where is the wind resource strongest. And together with our South African partners, that is what we are looking at. But, as the opening speaker said, hydrogen is a hot topic. And in Denmark, we are discussing hydrogen, and together with our South African partners, we are discussing hydrogen. And we just agreed that we will do a modeling study, like an analysis, on how could hydrogen be integrated in the South African energy mix. Just, food for thought. I would also put some words to how do we see hydrogen in Denmark, but I actually think I will save that for later so that we get through the panel, but we do have some, you can say, guiding principles on how we in Denmark see that we should use hydrogen. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Petra, let me turn to you. Okay, if there's applause, please feel free. I don't want to interrupt you. But from a UNIDO perspective, what are some of the key enablers addressing support for developing country partners through the global program for hydrogen in industry?
Thanks a lot. Yeah, very interesting discussion so far. We have actually launched our program with the aim to drive a local sustainable industrial development, and that builds on local production and application of hydrogen in the countries where these are produced. We know that export is relevant to fund this, but I think we need to have an equivalent there. Maybe 90% go to export and 10% stays in the country, or 20 and 80. So we have to see that we create additional value added in the transition economy and developing economies where we are working at. For this, we have come up in partnership. So everything we do in our program is in partnership, and you see it also reflected in this panel where we have organized together with ECOWAS and UNECE. We want to team up because it's a very complex undertaking, and we work on policies to enable this, aligning hydrogen development and industrial development policies. If countries in the development world want to use hydrogen for driving their own industrial development, they have to align, or they should, nobody has, but with a recommendation to align industrial development policies with hydrogen development policies. Second, we work on skills development. We have heard it before also in South Africa. We are going to join hands with this skills mapping. What is the force that we are needing? Can we also see that is something already existing? Can we upskill and not just start from zero? How can we also make sure that when construction is over, maybe these people still have a job then in the value chain? Third one is the international standards. So we just had recently also in Vienna the big ISO meeting where it was agreed the methodology on greenhouse gas emissions embedded in hydrogen production and transportation was agreed upon. So this is replacing the colors. Tomorrow this will be launched. So very important issues also for the recipient recognition on import and export. And innovation we are driving forward, and we work also very close with Women in Green Hydrogen to empower women there. A key element of our program are green hydrogen. We developed this before the colors were gone, or the colors are evading. So it's green hydrogen industrial clusters that really look how can you create local clusters. And here we worked very closely with Green Lab in Denmark. So that was a very good undertaking. See, can you bring the production of renewable to the production of green hydrogen, and then also drive it in the industrial development of this cluster. So eco-industrial parks and hydrogen production can go hand in hand. Very important to create these synergies. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next, Ms. Ridobro, Jeff is the largest provider of funds for environmental initiatives. So could you please tell us a bit about how you see Jeff's role in assisting the clean hydrogen transition, and in particular in developing and transition economies?
Thank you. Let me start by maybe explaining a little bit about the GEF. We are actually the operational entity of the financial mechanism of the UNECE. So we are following the negotiations closely, but we are not really known. So the Global Environment Facility is a multilateral fund created in 1992 at the Rio Summit, and we help developing countries. We provide grants to developing countries to help them deal with the most actual environmental threats, including climate change, and of course, helping countries reach a net zero economy. So with that as a background, there are two main areas the GEF provides support. This is concessional finance, and the second one is we help countries develop a supportive regulatory framework. So as for the first one, concessional finance, I mean, we all know that when talking about financing green hydrogen, we have to realize that green hydrogen is not economically viable right now in most of the developing countries, in many developed countries. And most likely the first large-scale renewable energy hydrogen will have to rely on a multi-source financing structure, including concessional finance. And to that end, it is where public financial mechanisms such as the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, could play a really important role in helping countries deal with the extra cost of green hydrogen compared to the business as usual scenario. And the GEF, about 2 decades ago, we play an important role in helping developing countries deploy solar and wind technologies, and we have many successful cases where the concessional finance that we provide were really successful, for instance, in Uruguay to develop the wind energy industry there. So this is as for the concessional finance that we provide, but also our grants are often used by countries to develop a supportive regulatory framework. As you may know, banks and investors will like a really will require a regulatory framework that is centered and that is secure, right? And government policy will likely drive the development of the sector, particularly at the beginning. So to have a really strong regulatory and policy framework is really important. Most of our projects are going towards that direction. So so we have concessional finance, we have regulatory framework, and I wanted to maybe make a comment here related to the presentation made at the very beginning about the value chains and what is, because we keep, or at least we keep comparing the renewable energy deployment with green hydrogen deployment, but there is a big difference between the two of them. And when the renewable energy revolution started, like 2 decades ago, there was only one question that was asked by in-bank and investors, right? And that was, so will the wind and solar energy compete with the existing gas and coal? So there was only this question to be answered, right? Because basically the demand, energy demand was there. Projections were showing that energy was really demanded in the countries, and the question of how to get into the market was solved by the energy grid, right? But here with green hydrogen, the equation becomes a little bit more complex, and the value chains that was showing before in the screen is a little bit different, right? So we have to have a local source of water, we have to have renewable energy available nearby, then we have to deal with the production of green hydrogen, transportation, distribution, and end use, right, of the green hydrogen. So all these issues need to be factored in when we structure projects. So every time we receive a project or proposal that we assess for either concessional finance for investment or pilots, or for either regulatory framework, we really assess that those issues are factored in when designing the project and when designing the policy or roadmap or whatever. So I think I just wanted to make this comment right on why it was also only 44% of the green hydrogen projects, they come to a conclusion in terms of financing, right? So that's one of the reasons, and this is something that we are assessing internally when we receive proposals. Sorry, I was too long.
No, not at all. It was perfect. Thank you so much. And then let me turn last to Mr. Izzo. From your perspective, to stimulate investments along the clean hydrogen value chain, and in particular to fully leverage the socio-economic benefits and potential of clean hydrogen, how is the EIB supporting developing countries to create bankable projects?
I'll start probably from the last comment of the panelists you just heard, which is, you need to bring the project into an economic profitability. So you have to make sure that it has an economic proposition that is investable. And what do you need for that? Probably, finance is the last piece of the jigsaw that you need to look at. You need to look at fundamentally how you bring the economics of the project at par with what today is production of hydrogen from fossil resources. Fundamentally, low cost of energy, with scale reducing the production cost of hydrogen through electrolysis, and then having close to the site of production, or if not close, pretty foreseeable, the offtake at a price that gives you a return. And what you need actually to make sure that these three elements fit together. And we started hearing it. We need strategic sort of like planning at national level, and that's what the bank does with some of its trust funds and technical assistance activity in creating that, supporting developing countries and local and regional players in planning their decarbonization path, both in terms of expansion of the renewable generation capacity and in identification of relevant industrial clusters where there is potential on one side to scale up the manufacturing through electrolysis of green hydrogen, and also to have the offtake as close as possible to the production. And I think the slide that the keynote speaker, that Dario, put out at the beginning with the three red circles pretty much resonates to what we believe is the first step of lifting up the production of green hydrogen, not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe. And that's where advice from the trust resources that we have should go to local government, and then also to project preparation. So that's the second piece of the jigsaw. So proper project development, sourcing of the right suppliers, making sure that there is the right infrastructure, proximity of infrastructure to have a case that then is bankable. A third element I wanted to bring into the conversation is the participation of the bank to the EIB to the design of the EU Hydrogen Bank. The EU Hydrogen Bank is an instrument that is set up by the Commission, which has, let's say, a regional leg that should support the production and sale and step up of manufacturing capacity of green hydrogen in Europe, but it has also an international leg. And this international leg will revolve around implementing systems to centralize the purchasing capacity of member states' potential purchasers, so creating on one hand the volume for offtake, but also tackling the third sort of element of the equation I described at the beginning in terms of bankability and economic profitability of green hydrogen banking cases, which is pricing. The so-called green premium. So to what extent there will be a mechanism, whether auction or generally supported by platforms, to recognize a certain premium to, at the beginning, allow green hydrogen projects to be more competitive versus fossil fuels one. And I'll stop here for the first part.
Thank you very much. Now, I promise I will turn to the audience for questions at some point, but let me keep going with the panel for now. And we've been pretty efficient with our time so far, so as I ask you this question, if there are other topics you'd like to bring in as part of this discussion, please feel free. But Dr. Schaefer, let me turn back to you first. Could you please talk to us about the Green Hydrogen Business Alliance and how it's providing assistance to developing countries to create local value and to build opportunities to establish new markets and industries?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I don't know if you've ever heard of the Business Alliance, of the Green Hydrogen Business Alliance, but it was funded 2019, and to give support on hydrogen development projects and enterprises. In the meantime, we do have around 200 enterprises as, let me say, members of the Green Hydrogen Business Alliance from Germany, from all over Europe, and in our partner countries. At the beginning, they acted as some kind of knowledge base to identify hurdles to deal with and to realize hydrogen-related projects. And like mentioned several times this afternoon, the bankability gaps, regulatory framework establishment, and so on. But meanwhile, we can say that the Business Alliance was involved in several, I think, very strong and good hydrogen projects, like, for instance, the 100 megawatt pilot plant in Morocco they contributed to, and the H2 Global, which I say it's some kind of the German answer on the Hydrogen Bank of Europe. or the first step of the European Hydrogen Bank. And for us in Germany, it is a logical step that we do now integrate the business alliance in a green energy transition project. It's a multi-donor project on European level, which has two main pillars. One pillar is Get Transform, it's called. It's some kind of supporting partner countries on the regulatory framework establishment. The second pillar is called Get Invest. And Get Invest brings project investors and banks or financing institutions together to close the financing gap of energy, renewable energy projects, and in the future hydrogen project. And the third pillar will in the future be to the business alliance, which brings the companies and the governments and the bankability, let me say dealers, together to realize hydrogen-related projects on the whole value chain, not only production but use as well. And yeah, I think that we've finished up this integration process within the next month, so that maybe within the next year, middle of the year, the three pillars will be able to work very close together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yoshioka, let me turn to you again. Japan has set a target to reach a maximum hydrogen supply of 3 million tons per year by 2030. In your opinion, how might this target be achieved? And is international cooperation an element of how Japan might reach this target?
Thank you for the question. Yes, Japan is now targeting a very ambitious goal by 2030s. And in order to achieve these goals, I personally think it's very important for us to change replace the old vehicle to the new vehicle like EV or FCV. And the Japanese government already committed to some kind of changing the vehicles, and it will also targeting some commercial vehicles as well. Specifically, the Japanese government are targeting 800,000 FCVs, 1,200 FC buses, and 10,000 forklift trucks by 2030. By changing the demand side, it is very huge impact on the Japanese energy emissions, CO2 emissions, because half of the CO2 emission from Japanese island is from transporting and industry section. So regarding the answer for question from him, my answer should be that changing the demand side is one of the important answer for that. And regarding cooperating with developing and emerging countries, UNEDO is now conducting feasibility study project on heat utilization in factories in India and on fuel cell trucks and buses in Thailand. In doing so, we are committing to environmental issues in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Hosta, maybe I can turn back to you. I asked you before about your international cooperation, but maybe I can ask you now a bit about Denmark and your own national plans. I understand that the Danish Energy Agency has assessed that power to X, as it's often referred to, is an essential part of achieving your 70% reduction goal by 2030. From an industrial perspective, what are the industries that you see PTX potentially promoting within Denmark?
Yes. First of all, it's very important to say that even though we have been looking at making hydrogen in Denmark for years, centuries, decades, it's still very much early days in regards to regulating it. We don't have a regulation set up yet for the hydrogen production. Also, I think another thing that is very important to say about the Danish view on hydrogen production is that we see that from a Danish perspective, in Denmark, we are only looking at producing hydrogen from renewables. So solar, hydro, wind, but it must be a renewable energy source. And then the use of the hydrogen in Denmark. We are very much looking at it in order to be something that we will use in the last part of the change to the hard-to-abate sectors. So not yet for heating or something like that, more for the hard-to-abate sectors, shipping, airplanes, these kind of things. And then, when it comes to the resource, the offshore wind, I just said that we had 60% of offshore wind electricity in our grid. I think it's very important to say that we will produce hydrogen from excess wind. It will be whenever the wind is blowing too much, that's when we turn on the hydrogen factories. And then a last point is also something about, back to the regulation thing, because we are very much looking into it right now. We have an office within the Danish Energy Agency that is going to Brussels every other week discussing how can we make a European regulation of hydrogen. And so far, it's just the things that we're getting back, and remember this is early days, is that it is so complicated. If we thought that offshore wind was difficult to regulate, then regulating hydrogen, it takes environment, security, regions, fire authorities, maritime agencies, energy agencies, TSOs. It's quite complicated, at least seen from a Danish point of view. So, when you ask me what is the big business case in this, we're sure it's there, but I won't be too firm on it yet, if that's okay.
I think that's very fair. Thank you so much for that. Petra, let me turn back to you. From UNIDO. UNIDO developed and launched recently its technical guidelines on green hydrogen industrial clusters with a number of partners. Could you talk about how these clusters approach contributing to driving industrial development opportunities for developing countries?
Yeah, thank you. I think I already answered the question a little bit before, but let me just enter again a bit more in the detail. So we need a big hydrogen transition, and we need big projects, but we also need smaller projects. We also need cluster projects that we can combine with industrial application. And this is what this model is about. Building up the renewables with partners, bringing the renewables to the hydrogen production, and then applying it. And through this, we can also build up the value chain that you mentioned before, because that will come hand in hand. That is one part. Second part is these hydrogen clusters will be evolving in close cooperation with the local stakeholders. You mentioned how complicated policy making is, but if you don't involve the local stakeholders in this, you will not have a successful program. So this is very important. People, you hear all the debates, water, hydrogen is taking all the water along. Ladies and gentlemen, the most water is used in fossil fuels, in coal, in oil, and not in green hydrogen, renewable hydrogen. So please get the numbers right, and let's not forget about it. If we have desalination, we can produce, like in Oman now, and I just see Alicia there in the background, that we have hydrogen oasis where we also deliver additional water for agriculture. So there is a positive spillover effect for the local population. The same is with energy generation. We should build hydrogen clusters that are also delivering, through a PTX approach, additional resources to the local population. This is about the clusters, and of course all the job creation that is there in the region. Second, another aspect of these clusters is the de-risking of investments. And you were referring to this through a careful, pre-assessment, to bringing the stakeholders together, addressing the different elements that are there, addressing the different policy elements. And I think there's one that we missed in this discussion is the permitting. It takes ages. It's far too long. How can we speed it up? I mean, we don't have time. We need to accelerate this. And this is why you have here the partners on the panel, because we need different partners to engage there. And to finish up, I'm very thankful to Jeff because with their support, we are going to initiate programs in 10 countries in the next year where this is a key element and all the enablers will be driven there. And then according to where the country stands, we can provide faster answers and faster support, be it policy advice, be it on skills, be it on technologies, on innovation. This is what we want to bring forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of Jeff, let me turn back to Mr. Dogo. Global cooperation in general has been a running theme of many of the questions so far. Let me ask you, from your perspective, how do you see enhancing global cooperation as an enabler to further unlock the potential for clean hydrogen in developing economies?
Yeah, no, thank you indeed. As I was mentioning before, global cooperation is key given the complexities of the green hydrogen value chain. And if we want to have a bankable project, we need all the moving pieces to come together. So we need kind of a whole of an industry or even society approach, also in line with what you were mentioning before, right? As for the Global Environment Facility, we are aware our funds are limited. We have over 5 billion for 4 years, but we distribute that among all the developing recipient countries. And it's not just for green hydrogen, but also for other sectors. So we realize our resources, even though it's grant resources, they are limited. So we do have a co-financing policy. So for every dollar that the GEF invests, there has to be between $7 and $9 from different other sources. And as part of our policies and procedures, we need co-financing from different sources, ideally from public and private, and this is something that we take into account when we assess the proposals. And also in line with the global cooperation, we are trying to move from like a standalone project to more a programmatic and integrated approach. And well, this is not still approved, but we are working, as Petra was mentioning, we are designing a program on green hydrogen together with UNIDO, where we are bringing different countries together. This still needs to be approved, but we are bringing different countries together, and there's a global coordination platform where this is a space where countries can share lessons learned, resources, experiences. So this is the kind of approach we are moving towards more, and we hope to do that with green hydrogen as well and engage with all the green hydrogen community that is out there. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Itso, from your perspective, what are the financial mechanisms required to scale up public-private capital or other forms of capital in clean hydrogen developments? And how can international partnerships and investments complement these kinds of efforts?
Well, I'd like to start actually with an example following on Tilde's comments. I mean, we announced 2 days ago with the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst partnership the signing of a Power-to-X deal with Ørsted, actually for the production of green methanol in Denmark. Now, the economics are the same, you know, all the known economics today for bankability of the type of transaction are the same that for actually Power-to-X with green hydrogen. I mean, the construction needs to be the risk. So you need a blend of grant and patient capital that is capable of looking at the technology risk and innovation that is brought into there and absorb that risk for the phase that, you know, the pilot demonstrates the technology. Then when it gets to operation, again, the supports to the higher operational cost or lower, if you want, revenue is also supported by concessionary money funds, grants, and by concessionary terms in the, I would say, impact risk capital facility that we've put down. So I think that the same sort of instruments are necessary to lift off the weight of the first, you know, demonstrators and scaled up facilities also outside of the regional sort of like borders of Europe. You need investment grants for the construction. You need catalyst, you know, capital risk taker like EIB and in that case the foundation that are capable of looking at the technology and at the cost curve, you know, bearing patiently the de-risking phase of construction and scale up. And then necessary for the first phase, for the first projects, it is important to have support also through operation, either through operational subsidies or with mechanisms that close that green premium between the production of the green substitute carrier or fuel and the fossil fuel ones. So I think, together, the answer is you need also partnerships. This was not a game alone of the EIB or the Commission. In the case there was donor money coming from the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst Foundation. There are similar blended instruments available in the EU, but they are not so powerful yet, and that's where actually we have to work together to make sure that they are available to replicate outside of the EU the same sort of incentives and mechanics.
Great, thank you. Now, I did promise to turn it to the audience, so I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. I do have more I can ask you, but I would really encourage you, I already see one hand. Please feel free to raise your hand. I would ask you to introduce yourself quickly, and if you're directing your question to someone on the panel, please indicate who that is.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm Shani. I'm from ASEAN Center for Energy. I work with 10 ASEAN governments in energy. So thank you for sharing your thoughts today. My question is, hydrogen is a very hot topic now, and it's something that also started to be discussed in ASEAN regions. But somehow we often quite forget that the hydrogen conversations is initiated from the advanced economy, where the already experienced significant progress of power decarbonizations. And this is something that is, from my perspective, coming from the developing countries, Southeast Asia, this is something that we are struggling with as well, because if we are start to talk about hydrogen, it's also a struggle for us for doing power decarbonizations and industrial decarbonizations at the same time. So prioritizations of this effort is something that we are struggling in Southeast Asia country. My question is perhaps, I want to ask your thought, when and how actually developing countries should be started involving in this hydrogen conversations. Because for us, from the Southeast Asia region at least, we are a big exporter as well for industrial commodity to the advanced economy as well. So this is something that I would like to hear from you, how to balance these priorities out for power decarbonizations and industrial decarbonizations, because both meaning that we need to prioritize RE development. So this is something that I would like to hear from you.
It's an important question, and I think perhaps there may be multiple people who would like to take it. And Petra, would you like to go ahead first?
Yeah, if you allow, I could go first. I don't think that is a contradiction. I mean, you need renewable energy for producing clean hydrogen, renewable hydrogen. If you're going for renewable hydrogen, of course, you can also go for blue hydrogen, which is with carbon capture. Apologies for using colors again. I was told I should not use colors again, but so you need to build up your renewable energy in the region. And I know the region is lacking behind, so there has to be an offtake. But at the same time, while you're doing this, and I had the same discussion with South Africa, where they were telling us, so how can we export hydrogen in a country where we have blackouts and where this is happening, where we still don't have sufficient renewable energy. Coming back to these cluster approaches, that would also drive this, because then you have a local application and you're steering the local production of renewable energy, and then you can also start decarbonizing your sector. And by that, instead of exporting green hydrogen, you would look into an export of green goods, which is a bit easier to transport also. So it's not a contradiction, but you have to find the right balance for both of these.
Thank you, Petra. Anyone else like to?
Maybe one thing to add or to underpin. I think it is important to produce the green hydrogen with additional renewable energy, and not with the renewable energies you got in your grid, maybe, because this is a discussion we had in Europe as well 2 years ago. And the consequence was a delegated act which defines what is green hydrogen or what is green energy in Europe, because the main focus was to avoid additional emissions when we do produce hydrogen with existing renewables, and as a consequence using more fossil fuels for producing electricity for households or industry at the end. So if you want to decarbonize the industry, it is important to use additional renewables, and there should be no time gap between the electricity production, renewable-based electricity production, and the production of the hydrogen. It's a quite technical topic, I know, but this is the topic you need to deal with. You got to find a solution to avoid additional emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything on this point? Please go ahead.
Maybe if I may, I'm not as expert as then on industry, but my advice will also to look into the industry profile that the country has, because there are some low-hanging fruits. Like there's some sectors that are easy to decarbonize, others that are more difficult, others that are more economically efficient to decarbonize to green hydrogen. We know, for instance, fertilizers is one of the main entry points for green hydrogen. So I will look into the industry profile of the country to see if there are any long-hanging fruits that green hydrogen would really help.
Great. Okay. I see a couple of hands. I saw your hand back there first. And then I see two more, so I promise you I've caught you. Please introduce yourself when you get the mic.
Yep, David Franz of Rollenberger. Hydrogen for the steel industry is one of the ways to decarbonize. Many expect that ideally the hydrogen would cost $3 per kilogram, and that's already challenging. But if you calculate $3 per kilogram, that's very similar than a CO2 tax of $300 per ton. So how do you see the economics work? Because even $2 per kilogram hydrogen is the same as a CO2 tax of $200 per ton. And I don't see CO2 taxes of $200 per ton. In Europe, we're at, let's say, roughly 90. So how do you expect to make that profitable?
This goes back to that green premium question, the topic I before. So anyone would like to take this on?
Well, that is really the question to be addressed. Whether you create a system that tops up the price until you've reached that scale and sort of like also low cost LCOE of the electricity input. I think expert of regulation here might add, there is a more fundamental question of actually pricing more high at a higher level, carbon pricing when it's imported in developing countries. So the question of what is the right pricing of carbon is definitely there. But I think that we really need to focus on first sort of like demonstrators and projects that are close to the immediate use, and that they show a case for actually reindustrializing, bringing development, bringing skills and employment, especially outside of the EU, in areas that are suffering from an industrial viewpoint. The economics at a broader scale, once the capital starts being moved on this type of cluster and assets, will gradually sort of like pan out and square. We cannot look at the economics of today as the economics in 5 years or 10 years when we will have the first big demonstrators rolled out.
Thank you. Oh, Dr. Schäfer, please go ahead.
Sometimes it's not a question of economics. Sometimes it's a question of regulation. So if we want to meet the goal of greenhouse gas neutrality by 2050, sooner or later, either we do have economic incentives or we do have regulations which says, no, you are not allowed to emit carbon dioxide. You've got to use another process. You've got to use, for instance, hydrogen. So sometimes, often economics is a very good choice to bring it to a fuel switch, for instance. But sometimes you need regulations to meet the goals you want to meet. And another point is, this underpins as well that you only should need or use hydrogen in hard-to-abate sectors. That's important as well, because sometimes hydrogen is discussed as a one-fits-all solution. It is not a one-fits-all solution. Of course, you can use hydrogen in a very broad way. You can use it for vehicles, you can use it for heat, you can use it for whatever, but it makes no sense. We are discussing, in this COP, we are discussing of tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency. And we are talking about energy efficiency we should not use hydrogen for vehicles. We should not use hydrogen for heat, batteries to use heat pumps or whatever, but not hydrogen. Thank you.
I see our, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to make a really short comment on that, and it's a really good question actually, and a difficult one to answer. My only comment will be that we need to factor in everything in that equation and in those numbers, including the implicit fossil fuel subsidies that some countries have. So it becomes a little bit tricky and complex, but my only comment is that we need to factor in everything in that equation.
Thank you. I see a couple more questions in this row. Let me start with you, Yunji. Over here, towards the middle of the room. Yeah. Do you mind standing up so she can find you more easily? There you go.
Good evening. Thank you all for your time. My name is Marco Marsans. I'm a student at Yale University. A number of you mentioned hydrogen exports. However, it's my understanding that hydrogen is exceptionally difficult to transport, partly because it's highly reactive, partly because it leaks easily. So how are your respective organizations thinking about the challenges in hydrogen transportation? Or is it, as you said, simply too early to know?
Great question.
Yes.
Please, Mr. Yuji.
Maybe in that field, Japan is leading because Kawasaki, the private company named Kawasaki Juko is already made a kind of a hydrogen ship, as you may know. And we got a huge fund from the Japanese government, and we are now managing the new project, which is in that project we are now creating a new hydrogen ship. It's a kind of a much bigger size than the current hydrogen ship. So we are now very prepared for the transporting hydrogen. As you may know, it's very difficult for the contain the hydrogen in such tank, but I heard that some kind of appropriate size of the tank, it can work, and so we are now utilizing that kind of tank. And you also may know that because hydrogen is very dangerous, so we are now combining N and H, that kind of NH3 ammonia, and it can be very easily transported. So, and the making the NH3 is very easy in our current technology. So it's a very feasible way, but it is very criticized by environmental criticism. But NH3 is very feasible, I think. Thank you.
Please, you wanted to add something? Yes, Dr. You had to, absolutely.
It's a very good question. I mean, Japan being an island and looking into a hydrogen ship, that's very interesting. Denmark being landlocked with Germany. We are, and I'm no engineer, but I listen to my engineer all day. We are looking into actually using the grid that we already have for natural gas. So using the existing tubes, also going to Germany and going to our neighboring countries. That's what we're looking at, but that's a short distance. And as I hear it, the discussion is not that it's difficult within short distances, so of like 300 kilometers. But that was just the Danish point of view.
Thank you. I see, there was one more question in this row, and then I promise to turn to you.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Sayad Mudashiro, and I'm with the Canadian Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Association. My question sort of piggyback a little bit with what the gentleman just said. I wanted to talk about transportation, because when you try to scale hydrogen and to create a real hydrogen economy, you will need to build pipeline. My question is very simple. I'm just wondering if you guys have come across requests for financing any pipeline at all, and what kind of entities are making those requests?
Anyone have any answer to that? Any requests received, or maybe even just some interest? Dr. Schaefer, please go ahead.
Let's talk about the pipelines. The pipelines, the distance, the transport distance we discuss with pipelines is a distance of about maximum 2,000 kilometers. And in Europe, we do have a discussion how to to build up a so-called hydrogen backbone. And this is mostly financed on a public level, but it's not a job of the government to finance the whole transportation applications like pipelines or whatever. Sooner or later, it's a private job to do this, but of course, as we do want the decarbonization of the industry, it's clear that we do need to give some more support, especially to build up the hydrogen backbone, the start of the pipelines. But sooner or later, the private sector need to build it. Additionally, when we talk about the transportation distance of about more than 2,000 kilometers, maybe from Africa or whatever to Europe, we're talking about shipping and not pipelines. Maybe Northern Africa, pipelines as well, okay, but for a distance or South America, we do need ships, and I don't believe in hydrogen ships, okay, but I do more believe in ammonia, LNG, green LNG ships, or methanol, but it depends on the application at the end, because you need ammonia for fertilizer production, you need, for instance, LNG if you do have some energy applications for peak loads or whatever, or methanol for ship transport as well. So it's not a one-fits-all derivative of hydrogen which will be transported. I think that will be a broad range of hydrogen, kinds of hydrogen derivatives will be used in the future and will be transported in the future as well.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything on the pipeline question on investments? Or
pipeline, I can tell, for example, at the moment we're receiving requests mainly for distribution grids, which are within clusters. So within, port areas where you already have, industrial off-takers. So they're very short. There is some repurposing, but again, for very short distances, the TSO, the transmission system operators in Europe. But mid to long term, it's not, we still don't believe that that's, the first use of grid hydrogen already, for transport long distance and being used in energy. So it's there isn't the time horizon, and there isn't also the end use that justifies investing in pipelines. There could be arguments for refitting and repurposing, but that's as I said, I think first use should be for local clusters to scale up production for decarbonizing hard-to-abate industries like fertilizers, steel, and then thinking about scaling it up to the level of creating corridors from the south to the north for the transport of the carrier.
Great, thank you. Now, I did see one more question, so please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Frank Wouters, and I would like to take a step back when we're talking about the energy system as a whole, and I'm working with Petra on supporting the hydrogen initiatives at UNIDO. 2 weeks ago was in the United States, and somebody showed a beautiful graph about the overall primary energy demand in the world, which is about 167,000 terawatt hours. And next to it, he had a picture about the storage, which is 142,000 terawatt hours. So 85% of all global primary energy demand is currently in storage. 1/3 is oil tanks, another third is heaps of coal, and then we have a whole bunch of natural gas. Now think forward, we need to decarbonize. All of that stuff will have to go, because it's all carbon. Then think, what options do we have? We have biomass, we can continue to keep burning hydrocarbons, and we have to capture CO2, or we can use hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives. Because we also have to realize that electricity is beautiful, we know how to do that clean, etc., but it's 20% of all final energy. And how do we transport electricity? Through transmission lines, but a bulk of it is also through molecules. Because, we take natural gas from a place to another place. There we turn it into electricity, and then there is electricity transmission. So the role of molecules in the global energy system is currently still being, very, very much misunderstood. So we need to clean up the molecules, which will also be there in the future. This is way more systemic than many people think. And then we get back to infrastructure. The 3,000 kilometers is unfortunately a mistake in the
2,000, I said 2,000.
Well, there is a 3,000 limit, which was in a report by the IEA a couple of years ago. That's actually a mistake. They modeled a small pipe. There is no limit to pipelines. So you can do 8,000 kilometers of pipelines for natural gas and hydrogen, all of those things. So there's no limit to pipelines. They're the cheapest way to transfer energy in bulk. So I do think, we need to think about infrastructure and storage in a much more systemic way. And it's a precursor for the energy transition. It's not something that comes later. Without the infrastructure, we cannot do that transition. So I do think we need to, somehow, turn it upside down. Focus on infrastructure, then everything else will follow. Otherwise, we'll just running behind the curve.
Thank you for the provocative thoughts. Anyone want to respond to this point on the infrastructure needs? Yes, Dr. Schiff, please go ahead.
2,000 versus 3,000. What I mean is, when you want to transport hydrogen or derivative from South America to Europe, it is much cheaper to do this by ship, not by pipeline. That's what I wanted to say. And the reason why we do transport natural gas, not a distance than 3,000 kilometers, is also an economic reason. So it's at the end. We do have an economic discussion. Do we need ships or do we need pipelines? And that's what I want to reply on this.
Oh, thanks.
Well, maybe we could discuss later.
We worked on this. This week we launched a report on bulk transport of hydrogen from the Middle East and Europe, in between Middle East and Europe. I'm happy to send you a copy.
Thank you.
Great. Any other responses to this or any other questions from the audience? We're down to our last few minutes, so I can probably squeeze in one more. Was there a hand over in the corner? Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lacey Eastman. I'm the president of Intercontinental Energy. We have about 200 gigawatts of upstream wind and solar located in Western Australia, Oman, and other Middle Eastern locations. The reason we chose them is because they're coastal deserts. They have extremely high levels of sunlight during the day, every day, and they have really heavy wind at night. So that's the lowest cost of hydrogen you can make worldwide. And I think that that's really important. If you're going to be using this in a lot of different cases, if you need to produce it somewhere where it is inexpensive. And that is absolutely the least expensive way to make hydrogen. And I actually had something else to say originally, but there were so many questions I just wanted to add on. The issue with hydrogen is not so much of reactions, but that the boiling point is negative 253 degrees Celsius, which is 20 degrees above absolute zero. So if you turn it into ammonia, it's only negative 33 degrees Celsius, and that's a lot easier to move around by ship. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of people are looking at ammonia to ship hydrogen around. But in short distances and as Frank said, I'm actually never going to disagree with Frank on pipelines because he's written 5 books. Everyone should know that. But definitely for shorter distances, pipelines make a ton of sense because it's storage. You can change the compression. You can change it up and down, so that gives you this capacity factor that is really what drives the cost of your final product. So we go from upstream wind and solar, we go to green hydrogen, then to green ammonia. All of those manufacturing activities, they want to be on all the time. You do not want to turn them down for a little bit. You don't want to turn them off. So what's the most important thing is the cost of your green electrons. So go to the place that is cheapest in the world, which is coastal deserts. And number 2 is that you have the highest capacity factor, so that you are feeding this in, you are running your downstream equipment all the time. That will give you the lowest cost of ammonia and of hydrogen. So I just wanted to put that out because there were a number of questions around costing and why should we do this in some places and how should we ship. But one question that I had, I know we talk a lot about the just transition, and we talk about the global south, and we talk about the north, but we don't often talk about the disparity within countries. So most of the people that suffer from living next to a refinery or next to the 5 landfills in the United States are immigrant or minority communities, right? If you look for a landfill in the United States, minorities are living around that, and they are getting sick, they are getting asthma, all of these health knock-ons from being basically next to pretty toxic stuff. So in my situation, we have 2 projects in Western Australia.
Sorry, can I ask you to just wrap up your question real quick? We're down to our last minute. So if you could just finish your question and direct it to the audience. Yeah.
So two projects in Western Australia. For our second project, it's 50 gigawatts of upstream. It's quite large. We partnered with the traditional owners of the land, the Mirning Nation. So they have 10% of our project. We gave them a permanent board seat, carry them to FID. And we have a charter with them so that we won't do anything to harm their land, anything that they don't agree to. And this is not just something that needs to be thought about in Australia. This is in Canada, this is the US, this is in Chile, this is in the Middle East, even if it's not Native First Nations, you have Bedouin, you have nomadic communities. And I don't see a lot of attention to that, to the local communities within not just the global south, but also within places that have a lot of disparity between populations. I was wondering if anyone has any comments.
Great. So anyone talking about local community involvement in these projects? Petra, do you want to say something?
Maybe just very quickly, because we have to go to the closing.
Yeah.
I think in our cluster approach, we do this. We do this. That's all I want to say.
So there you go. It's definitely being discussed, but it's an important point, so thank you for raising it at the end. All right, so this is all that we have for our panel. Can we please give them a round of applause? Now, I'm very happy that we have one more speaker who's going to wrap things up for us. I'm going to turn the floor now to Stefano Signore, Head of Unit of Climate Change and Sustainable Energy at DG for International Partnerships, European Commission. Stefano, please.
Thank you very much, and also sorry for not having been able to follow the entirety of these discussions, which I've been told have been very rich. Let me say that when it comes to hydrogen, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that hydrogen and green hydrogen stand for opportunities for mobilizing the renewable energy potential of countries, opportunity for green industrialization, local value chain and jobs, and also opportunity for long-lasting win-win partnerships. And this is very important to keep in mind, as green hydrogen investments are also described as high risks, that maybe high risk come with a high reward. So green hydrogen has emerged as the rising enabler for a multi-sectorial transition toward a low-carbon economy based on renewable energy sources. Not at least because green hydrogen is fundamentally different from extracting fossil fuels, as it converts a resource that is not only abundant, but does not diminish, which is the renewable energy resource of the country. This is good news for countries that are rich in renewable energy, with many of them being low and middle-income countries in Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and Latin America. Green hydrogen is the opportunity to mobilize this renewable energy potential and for it to become the raw material to build green industrial processes and local value chains. Local value chains will drive sustainable development in the producer countries and create new high-skilled jobs and truly decarbonize industrial production in some of the most polluting yet hardest to abate sectors. And experience shows that you need to start domestically to then thrive internationally. And that is why the EU emphasized the development of local value chains. Climate change, energy transition, and energy security, hydrogen intersect with all of them, and all of them are globally shared concerns. And this opens up the opportunities for a long-lasting win-win around shared interest at this very decisive moment. That is why the EU Global Gateway comes into play. This is our strategy aim at mobilizing investment for up to 300 billion between 2021 and 2027 to boost major investment in infrastructure. And we are doing so under one brand, which is Team Europe. There are some important members here in the panel, bringing together EU, member state, European national financial institutions, and actively seeking to mobilize private sector finance and expertise. Global Gateway will make sure projects deliver and promote relationships that allow partners to maintain their economic competitiveness. Green hydrogen has therefore become rapidly a priority for Global Gateway, and we are working with several partner countries on regulatory framework, building institutional capacity, and develop projects together with private sectors. Important progress has been achieved, for example, in Namibia, Kenya, or Chile. However, it is also clear that this is not a sprint, but a marathon that requires long-term commitment and predictability. The energy transition, changing the energy infrastructure, and that includes integrating green hydrogen in our economy. It's not a short-term trend, it means sustainable commitment from business, industries, and government. The event today, I understand, touch upon some of the most important building blocks, such as predictable regulation, mobilizing finance, and de-risking investment in creating local hydrogen cluster and domestic value chain. A virtuous circle of international cooperation, policy innovation, and technological development has brought the energy transition a long way already, and the cost of renewable energy technology has decreased tremendously in the last decade. And we need to achieve the same for green hydrogen. Thank you very much.
That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your attention. Have a good rest of your evening.